I made an observation recently, more of a general rule, kind of a guideline, not to be considered always the case, but whenever somebody has an idea, even if it seems like it's a little wild, the first person who says that's a stupid fucking idea is the dumbest guy in the room. And I think that should be a good metric for figuring out who's open to new ideas, who's open to just making advancements, because, the old saying, a smart person sounds like a crazy person to a dumb person. And you can apply that to the comments that Trump made, or the inquiry he made about the disinfectants or UV light. Is antibiotics are a form of disinfectant. I mean, it was kind of a child's view of science, but it was really a rudimentary kind of look at the way that microbes interact with different chemicals, whether externally or internally, and how we go about killing them, um, for the sake of all health and medicine. But of course, people just run with that and go, "Oh my God, he said inject Lysol." Well, he didn't say inject Lysol. He said some sort of disinfectant. But whatever, I digress. It was kind of a wild idea, but there's actually a company that does a hydrogen peroxide nebulizer, or it's some sort of device like that, and it's a commercially traded one. So anyhow, it's just kind of reflective of the entire polar climate that we see with politics and opinions and ideas, and it's all the clickbaity, pushy stuff. Nobody has any sort of degree of nuance at all. They just kind of, whatever the hell they agree with the most or makes the other guy look the worst, they just run with that. And it's just really kind of beating us up, I think, as far as intellectually and our morale overall as a country. Um, it's going to affect us in a lot of different ways over a very long time, because we don't really know how to handle all this influence from the social media and the competition that the legacy media is facing from these uh, individual outputs, like that you see on YouTube channels, the podcast, and other independent individual reporters that are out there trying to give a more balanced, nuanced view of things. And you've got companies like CNN and MSNBC or Fox that gotta sell commercials, and that's really their only purpose, is to give you a little bit of information, but mostly to sell you some products, to keep you glued to a TV, so that way you'll stick by for the next, shake weight or whatever the fuck the commercial is running in between their, talking head segments, where people just trying to give you the television equivalent of clickbait to keep you tuned in. And, we see that's making us dumber. It's making everybody dumber. It's so bad. I can't even stand to watch TV anymore. I certainly don't watch any sort of news programs that come on. I can read articles, and if I can get the transcript of something that went on, because I can't even stand to hear these people's voices. They're so artificial and, what do you call it, canned. It's everything is so processed and refined before it's put out to be a segment, and it's just the most intellectually offensive delivery of information I think that I've ever seen. And it really annoys me to sit there and try to endure it long enough to pick out the pieces that might actually be relevant to anything going on in the world. And I guess what's the most frustrating over the whole thing is that this bleeds over into people's opinions that they go espousing on, social media, on Facebook or Twitter or what have you, and are just really repeating the talking points that they hear from these idols that they see on TV, who are basically spoon feeding them their political agendas and how they should feel and think about the world. And then they go and get on Google or whatever their search engine is and start looking up articles that confirm their biases and get into these long-winded conversations or arguments. Where they're even hardly conversations at all, because it's just one person typing a fucking novel in the comments or copy and pasting from some article that they quickly Googled up that met exactly what they wanted to say, because they put it into the search engine and they type in the search engine, this is my point, this is what I want to say, and it gives them whoever the hell types something similar to that, and they go, oh look, here's an article from some published outlet, therefore it must be the fact, and here you go, this is the truth, I'm right, you're wrong, you're a fucking idiot, and everything I've ever done is morally superior to anything that you ever have done or will be. And that's the goal of that entire process, and it's pretty damn ineffective, because then you just have people that hate each other and people are talking past each other, and there's no clue about what the other person was really trying to say, or if they even had anything to say. Sometimes I wonder, they just want to feel right, want to feel better than somebody else, because they just kind of suck. They suck as a human. Maybe they don't really suck at being a person. Maybe they're not really that bad of a person, because there's a few of them that I've ran into that actually, over enough conversations was able to break some ground, and they turned out to be pretty decent people. But man, we get these walls we build up around us that are just made out of nothing but our own stupid shit opinions, and we defend them like they are the most valuable, important things on earth. And it's like, how fragile you gotta be that you have to go on the complete all and out offensive if you find somebody that doesn't think what you think or thinks what you think is wrong. I mean, you got to put it out there so you can keep yourself checked. And, there's going to always be people with horrible things to say. And, that's probably back to that opening statement, the dumbest motherfucker in the room. It's okay to ignore that guy. It's not even worth your time. It's not worth my time. In fact, I gave him too much time already in this segment. So moving forward, it's just looking at the whole corona thing and like what's going on with that, because I mean, who the hell can't talk about that right now? We've got people arguing over, should we even wear masks, and if so, how far apart should we stay? And like, that's something right there in my mind that kind of got me scratching my head. Well, okay, so if the virus can travel through your breath and coughs and sneezes up to 6 feet, why are we social distancing at 6 feet? Shouldn't it be 7 feet? You would want to be out of range of it, not like right at the end of its effective range, but still within the range. I mean, that's absurd. So I think that there's some bullshit that's being fed to us there. It's either got to be that it's not near that far, and in order to get people to stay outside its range, you have to tell them something that's, a little bit exaggerated. And I think that's probably closer to the truth, because, look at the backlash right now. There's a lot of people who think that the whole damn thing's a hoax. Well, I mean, 60,000 bodies is kind of hard to fake. I guess you could go full, conspiracy on it and say, okay, well, some of those are fabricated, and maybe that's not even all that much of a conspiracy, but, maybe the numbers are inflated. Maybe things that aren't technically COVID related are getting lumped in, and some of that could just be because there's confusion in the reporting, a lack of testing, and so maybe there's not all that many tests, and they don't know how to, if they have time to test a corpse, for it. Maybe it's not worth it to take the time to do it. And then, there's the whole monetary incentive, so that way the states can get the proper amount of federal funding, and then that adds a whole nother layer of potential for inaccurate reporting and perhaps fraudulent reporting that's, perhaps to the benefit of the state, but the detriment of the general public and the trust in the authorities. And I think that right there is probably the most dangerous thing about the whole situation is we get information that, doesn't really hash out all that well when you start thinking about it. It doesn't really add up. There's, you know, a good bit of truth in there, but there's things that just don't necessarily make sense. And then there's the information curve that's gone on along with this. It went from an isolated event in Wuhan, China, to a global pandemic that's transmissible human to human, and then of course there was the whole WHO thing going on about the refusal to acknowledge Taiwan as a country and just blatantly pretending that they didn't hear the question and then hanging up on the interviewer. And that really sowed some distrust into the whole situation there. I mean, man, into the whole, not situation, into the whole organization, and kind of set up the ground for all kinds of conspiracy theories. And I'm still kind of the mind that this thing could possibly have came from that lab there in Wuhan. And even if it wasn't a weapon or even an intentional release, and it was just really something they were trying to make to build better vaccines and got accidentally released, they certainly did everything they could to weaponize the effects of it. They cut off domestic travel and then they allowed international travel. And you could make the argument that they needed to let people who didn't live there, that weren't nationals, go back home to their countries before they quarantined them. But they were allowing their own nationals to go and leave and spread this around after they knew it had been transmissible human to human. And meanwhile, they're welding people inside their homes. And so, people willing to do that, to weld people inside of a building and let them die. I mean, if you're willing to do anything, you probably don't have a problem just saying anything to make things better for yourself. And I don't really know what more I could say to convince somebody of that, because it seems blatantly obvious to me that's how things played out. Could be wrong. Maybe there's some info I'm missing there, or a time point, but at this point, that's the best of my understanding. And then we've got the whole conflict between people who want to stay on lockdown, people that want to stay open or open back up. And, there's all this rhetoric about how selfish these people are and that they're just looking to go and get a haircut and let the weak die, and, fuck everybody who's not them. They're willing to take the chance, and, you're a sacrifice they're willing to make. But that's a really narrow, stupid view of the whole thing. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that lost their businesses, stuff that took them their entire life to accomplish and build up, or maybe even it was a family business that's been around for generations and been carefully and meticulously managed to stay through all the recessions and that, and now boom, here comes this, and you got to shut down. You've been saving up your whole life and trying to keep this thing afloat and doing it and done everything right, and now it's all taken from you through no fault of your own whatsoever, and you're going broke. You're going hungry. You're waiting in line for hours in your car for fucking food from a food bank. Where the hell do people go pee when they gotta wait there for that long at that? I mean, but I've seen miles and miles of cars backed up all over Houston for people waiting in line for food. I mean, they want to open up. They want to go. They want jobs. They want to go and eat. And yeah, I mean, the virus is scary, but starvation's pretty fucking scary too. Economic collapse, when things get that bad, people get pretty nasty, and people are a whole lot scarier than the virus when it comes down to that. And I get the other side of it. People are really worried about this thing going on for, you know, perpetually, well, maybe not perpetually, but going on for much longer than it otherwise would have if everybody would have just stayed home and, locked themselves in. But there's not a whole lot of guarantee that that ever would have happened anyway, because there was and there are, like, all the essential workers, everybody who's out there at the grocery stores, having to keep the food and supply chains open. And this genie's been out of the bottle a whole lot longer than what we think it has, or I believe it to have been out of the bottle a whole lot longer. If you look at the antibody tests that are out there right now, in order for it to have spread to that many people, that over so many different areas, New York and Los Angeles, that it had to have been around a whole lot longer, or it's a whole lot more contagious than what we think it is. And then it's really airborne and it's just spreading everywhere on the wind, and everyone who gets downwind of it's infected. And I don't really think that's the case, because there's lots of inherent disinfectant in UV rays that exist naturally in the sun. So stuff blowing around in the wind doesn't necessarily always get sterilized, but it gets exposed to a good amount of UV. And so I doubt that's the case, and I might not be completely right on that exact mechanism, but to me it seems at this point that it has been around a lot longer than we thought it did. Maybe even earlier than December, probably early November, maybe late October. It was a really interesting thing that I had seen when they did the initial lockdown of Houston. Is I don't call it a lockdown, but whatever. It was the order that granted them the authority was dated October 29th of 2019. So that was kind of strange to me, but maybe it was some part of a hurricane provision. I read the whole text of the thing, and I don't remember what it was right now, but that was well before they even heard of the Wuhan virus, or the Covid19. And that's another thing, like, calling it the Wuhan virus, China virus. It's kind of broad and sweeping, but we have Ebola, and we got Lyme disease, and a dozen other different ones named out of places, and maybe that's outdated, but I don't think that the Wuhan virus is really that bizarre of a term or a way to think of it. It's it's where it came from, and if it came from the lab, well, then it absolutely should be called the Wuhan virus, so that way everybody remembers exactly where the hell it came from, the lab in Wuhan. Now, if that turns out not to be the case, then hey, that's better news, I think, than having some sort of genetically superior disease running around out there that popped up organically, because this thing is fucking weird. I mean, I'm not a microbiologist. I don't know all that much about infectious diseases, but I haven't heard of doing all the things that this one does. It's just a little too perfect in its mechanism. I mean, it's jumped from bats to people to cats to dogs to minks now in just a matter of a few months. Like, that's a crazy zoonosis. I don't know if there's ever been anything that's that adaptable. I mean, typically these sort of evolutions take years or magnitudes of exposure to different hosts before they actually are able to go back and forth enough to make those adaptations to make a successful infection in an entirely new species. So, and then you have all the wild effects of it, respiratory, severe respiratory illness, and then this blood clotting that's going on and attacking kidneys and other organs. And the COVID toes, that was a thing that's happening apparently in the younger people that are affected by it, where they get a lot of bruising around their feet. I mean, this is it's pretty damn weird, and I don't think that that's all that impossible or anything like that to occur naturally. I mean, smallpox was pretty damn gnarly, made people sick as dogs, and then to make it worse, it covered them with all these horrible, disgusting sores all over their body. So not only were they miserable, feeling sick to their stomachs and, fever, but they had to deal with looking just terrifying and having nobody want to even look at them to give them help. Like, fuck, that's a hell of a way to go, right? I mean, not only are you in the worst state of your life, but you're looked at like a monster or toxic waste, and no one wants to fucking touch you. So you're all on your own. Nice knowing you. It was good. Please die over there quietly, you piece of trash. And then there was all the craziness that went down in Canada. The mass shooting up there, and then the quick authoritarian move to ban dozens of types of weapons that had previously had no issues there, as far as mass shootings. And it wasn't, by American standards, a large mass shooting, but it was still, it's still a tragedy, and people should, grieve over it. But these broad, sweeping legislations that, not even a legislation, it was, like executive fiat, it was a total totalitarian dictator move made. They just said, okay, nope, nobody's having any of this anymore. We're just fucking taking it. And it really kind of goes to show you that the entire idea of magazine capacity restrictions isn't really the effective method of mitigating these things, and it's definitely not the end game of this. And people can always go, oh, it's a slippery slope fallacy, you can't say that. Well, yeah, I can say it, and it's only logical that if your method of reducing the deaths caused in a single event is by eliminating the number of rounds that a magazine can hold, and you hold true to the fact that you don't think that any person should be at risk of being shot to death, then the only acceptable number in the end of bullets in a magazine is 0. Right? I mean, how are you going to have a mass shooting if you can't have more bullets than, or at least as many bullets that require to make a mass shooting, right? But if you don't even want one shooting, and you think that that's the way to do it is by removing bullets from guns, well, then the number of bullets that you want to allow in guns is 0. It does kind of make me wonder if there would be some sort of civilian fallout or citizen resistance, or maybe even a black market pop up in Canada for American firearms. There could be some sort of stream going that way. I think that probably there is a small black market happening, but Canadians are pretty chill when it comes to their overall demeanor, disposition, and attitude toward government and cooperation, and just being good citizens in general. I mean, you can look at the crime stats there compared to America. They're pretty non-existent. I mean, they're a much lower population density, and that's kind of one of the things there that really needs to be looked at a little bit closer. Is you can take Mexico in contrast. It's got way less guns than America and way more murder and violence, right? Way more poverty too, and I think that's the biggest indicator of what's going to be, going to cause a lot of violence and death and murder. And, they don't ever talk about mass shootings in Mexico, but they find mass graves all the damn time over there, and people getting, entire families shot up and murdered by cartels. And you can try to make the argument and the claim that, hey, those guns came from the U.S., and some of them did, right? There's no getting around that. But, the cartels, they don't need American guns. They get fucking military guns. They just buy them off soldiers, or they buy them from the base. The Zetas were literally the Mexican special forces that went rogue, and they started working for cartels as enforcers and security, and then they realized, like, oh shit, we don't even need you guys. We'll just kill you and take your drugs and your money and your mansions. Thanks for doing business. And here we go, right? They don't give a shit about our piddly ass semi-auto ARs. And then, you've got people on that side of things who want to go on about, the gun show loophole, because they think that A gun show is literally just a bunch of random dudes meeting and swapping guns. And, there are some face-to-face sales that take place, but the majority of people there, if you've ever been to one, are FFL dealers, right? So every single gun that those dealers sell still has to complete the 4473 background check. So, it's not the loophole that they say it is, because that doesn't even have to take place at a gun show. What they're trying to say is that it is the individual sale, the non-registered one. But even banning those outright won't change a damn thing, because nobody, no legal law-abiding citizen is intentionally selling guns to known felons, gang members, and prohibited persons as outlined, in the law. So there's a really easy way to get around that, but people on the left absolutely hate that as a scarlet letter, and it would be just to simply put the words prohibited on the IDs of people that aren't allowed to own guns. I mean, we do it for minors here in Texas, right? So if you are under 21, it says under 21 in big red letters across your driver's license. So when you try to get into a bar or go and buy liquor at a liquor store, as soon as you whip out your ID, guess what? They already know. You can't play games. You can't try to sneak it by them and hope that they don't see it. Big fucking red letters under 21. And we could do the same thing, prohibited, right? And so as soon as you implement that, and you put that on every damn ID who've prohibited persons, then, the sellers aren't going to want to risk selling to somebody who is prohibited, especially when it's that easy. And then you can avoid the whole de facto firearms registration that would be required to do that, to ban the outlaw of individual sales. And the reason why I say that is because you would have to have a registration in place in order to keep track of who sold what gun to who in the first place. And there's only like 300 million of them in circulation. Good luck getting everybody to line up and sign those back up. So the entire universal background check is a complete waste of time and just spending money creating a new organization and slowing down the background checks, because it's it's just going to be completely overwhelmed. There's absolutely no effective means to go that way. Okay, so we're a little bit past 27-minute mark. I just kind of want to get to be about 30 minutes because, this is my new swing at this, and I don't want to make them too long-winded, and, it's hard to just toe this road on my own here without having somebody else to bounce ideas off of, but I'm going to give it a try anyway with this solo attempt here. But then I was going to talk about the election coming up and how ridiculous the entire DNC is on this, because they got they got Biden in there, right? And Biden is like literally weakened at Bernie's Bernie. It's just the whole figurehead up there who's barely even able to string a sentence together, and everybody's pretending like it's normal. It's like, this is good, here he is, this is your guy, he's going to run the whole country. He can't even articulate a single goddamn sentence, but he's going to be in charge of the nukes. And the best argument they have is, well, he's not Trump. Yeah, so this is my big argument with the partisan politics that we have here, the two-party system, is that it's really this perfect little setup of divide and conquer, because they've got everybody hemmed in on this idea that a vote for the opposition is, well, a vote for anybody who's a third party is a vote for the opposition. But that exists simultaneously for both parties. Both parties are saying that. Okay, so if if you're talking a Republican and you want to vote for a Libertarian, they say, well, that's just a vote for Biden. And you're a Democrat and you want to vote for Bernie Sanders, or I guess, what is it, the Green Party, sorry. You want that Jill, I don't remember what her name is now. Well, that's just a vote for Trump. Well, if you voted for them and then they voted, and it's a vote for Trump, well, hell, you voted 3 times, right? I mean, you're a felon. So if you always take what they give you, then you'll always get what you're given. You'll never see any sort of real reform in political parties or structure, you won't see any meaningful change, because it's my belief that at the end of the day, all these people are just the WWE. They all the fights are staged, and they all get paid by the same guy or the same people, right? They all get the same checks. They all sit down to lunch together. They high five each other. They got a goddamn congressional barber. They have the same fucking people cutting their hair. And we're supposed to believe that these people are, political arch enemies and completely ideological separated and have absolutely polar different ideas. I think it's just a really sophisticated divide and conquer technique, and people bought into it hook, line, and sinker. Y'all motherfuckers got Stockholm Syndrome, which is another interesting place right now, right? Stockholm and Sweden, and the way that they're handling this. They're like, you know what? We're just going to keep on doing what we're doing, and we're going to see how the hell we hedge out. And, they got a lot of people dying, but shit, they're not doing any worse than New York, I think. New York is a really interesting thing that happened too, right? I mean, all those people dying there, and you had to believe that a lot of that has to do with the population density in subways and parking garages and common hallways of all these skyscraper apartment buildings. I mean, fuck, you can't get away from people. How the hell are you going to social distance when you're crammed into a bus like sardines in a can? You're toast, man. You're not going to be able to do that. And man, other cities around the world